As an author myself, did I mention there's a new Will Wilder book out this week? I love talking with writers, and I've had the privilege of speaking with some of the greats, whether it's about their craft, worldview, or the specific process they use. There's nothing like talking to a great storyteller and telling a few stories along the way. Best-selling author James Patterson publishes multiple books a year. How many collaborators do you have?
I don't know.
Ghostwriter.
Why? Are you looking for a job?
I might be. I'll give you the resume on my way out.
I don't. I should, because that question gets asked occasionally. Yeah. I don't know. I would say 7 or 8 probably.
Mm-hmm. How do you divide the labor? When
How does it work?
Yeah, right. You write the outline. You give
you
that
ready?
To
we alternate words. No. Yeah. Okay. No. I'll write a long outline. And then I suggest that I'd like them to contribute to the outline, partly because I want their contribution, partly because I want them invested, which is even more important. And then they go off, they do the first draft. I want to see pages every 2 or 3 weeks, which is not the way publishers do it. No. Because a publisher, you work for a year and a half and it comes in and they go, this isn't exactly what I was thinking. Mm-hmm. I was expecting something, it doesn't work that way with me. After I'll be going like, great, keep going, or hold it, we're off the tracks and let's talk about how it happened and what we do about it, et cetera. But it's a lot easier to deal with 2 weeks worth of writing than it is to deal with a year and a half polished, oh my God, my life is depending on this kind of thing. And then after I get a draft in, I will do however many drafts from one to...
You write repeated drafts of that one?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. How many normally?
Lately, it's more 1 and 2. In the past, it was more 3 and 4. But most of the people I work with now, I've worked with them for a while. They know, and we just have it.
You have the process now.
Once the voice is established, it becomes a lot easier to do so. That's why you can have a television series with maybe 8 writers.
Right.
Once the voice is in people's heads, they know how Tom Selleck is going to, how he's going to talk in Blue Bloods or whatever.
Right. So you're sort of the James Patterson showrunner. One of my most memorable conversations was in Stamford, Connecticut, at the home of this next author. He was also a yachtsman, a columnist, and founder of the National Review, William F. Buckley, Jr.
Pretended it's the only day I was ever messy.
Is this where you write your articles when you're here? And
yeah.
Books?
So I do all my work here. This was once a four-car garage.
Oh.
So
you converted.
The first few years I did one, and another one. Inevitably that happened.
When you write, I'm told you play Bach.
A bit, yeah.
Why?
Well, why not?
I want to talk for a moment about the intersection between your politics and your faith. Russell Kirk said your politics are more a function of your faith than your economics. How true is that?
The Bible absolutely insists on individual sovereignty in conscience and makes the case for freedom. God created us to be free. Under the circumstances, if you want complementary positive law, it should be a law that encourages that freedom. In my judgment, that which does so most successfully and which permits the development and the distribution of scarce resources is conservative political ideals of the kind that I have backed. That is the sense in which the two are connected. The insistence on the individuality of the human being. If we are, in fact, in God's eyes, all different, then any society that seems to say that we are not different has got to be wrong.
This next guest is one of the greatest writers of thrillers anywhere. We went down to Louisiana's Bayou Country to speak with James Lee Burke, a master novelist and a great guy.
I hit the wrong Rubicon with The Lost Get Back Boogie. That was the 4th book, viable book.
Right.
And I thought I would just publish it, but instead I went 14 years before I got back in hardback. And that book was rejected 111 times. And my agent, Philip Spitzer, whom I met when he was driving a cab in Hell's Kitchen and running a one-man agency at night, kept it under submission for 9 years.
Oh my God.
And we decided we'd just wear them down. I relearned this lesson during those years I couldn't publish. That if you never lose faith in the purpose for your gift, if you keep your contract with your higher power, the source of your creativity, eventually you'll see the reason for its presence in your life realized. I believe that absolutely, that God does not make mistakes. The teachings of Jesus are the most reasonable explanation for both our connection with the unseen world, and at the same time, it provides us with a way of living and contending with a world that in many ways we will never be compatible with. For me, it's the best way to live. I've tried other ways and they don't work as well.
Your cousin, Andre Dubus, said, I am a Catholic writer. I always look for what's the ethical question here.
Yeah.
Would you join that chorus?
Sure. I might rephrase it. I'm a writer who happens to be Catholic. But I talked to my good friend, Father Jim Hogan at Christ the King, our parish in Montana. He said, I was very complimented. He said, I just finished your new book. You're the most Catholic writer I've ever read. You ooze with Catholicism.
I write about very nice people whose lives are invaded. They are not looking for trouble. They are doing exactly what they should be doing, and something happens. And I think that maybe this is part of the reason that I've been blessed enough to be so successful. I think people walk in the shoes of the people in the book. They say, this could be me. This could be my daughter. This could be that sweet girl down the block this is happening to.
And even though terrible things, as you said, do happen to these people quite unexpectedly, in the end, everything seems to balance out, and there is a comfort, almost a reassurance in that. Are you aware of that as you're writing?
Well, you do realize that suspense, it is the sense of justice. The scales of justice have been balanced. The victim has been, her murderer, if it turns out to be that, has been caught. The justice is happening, and that's part of it. We all want the satisfaction of thinking that things are fair again.
I am told you occasionally off your enemies in your books. Is that true?
Oh, well, you know, I joke about that. You know, you have the plumber doesn't show up for the 3 months that the kitchen is being renovated. And I can visualize him.
Being bludgeoned over the head with a lead pipe. Oh,
no, I joke about the fact you can get all your meanness out, you know,
sure.
by murdering a few people, you know.
In print.
In print, purely in print.
The experience of your childhood looms large over your work and your life. Tell me about your father, Ray Koontz.
Well, my dad was, I didn't know what was wrong with my dad when I was a child. I didn't even know it until I was much later in life. But I knew he was an alcoholic because he was drunk much of the time. He had 44 jobs in 34 years. He would punch out the boss from time to time, and that's not a good move. And we never knew whether we were going to have a roof over our heads or where the food was coming from. My mom started working in a five and dime, and she was sort of the breadwinner of the family, but it wasn't much.
Had to be terrifying for you and your mother.
To a degree, and he would threaten to kill us frequently, but he would get into those things where life would go very badly for him. He had no faith, really, but then when things would go very badly and he would maybe end up in jail or in a bar fight or this or that, then he would suddenly take out the Bible and begin to read and declaim over it. And as a kid, I say this, it was a dark kind of childhood, but I was not an unhappy child. And when I first ever talked about it, I began to realize people thought, oh, what a poor, sad child. But in reality, even as a child, I knew that happiness was a choice. And you could always find something in the worst of times to make you happy. That didn't make the worst times go away, but it meant that there was a way out of this. And for me, very young, it became books. There were no books in our house, so I would get them from the library. And by reading, I discovered very important things. And number one was, not all families were like this. When you're growing up in that environment, you assume that this is normal. And when you find out it's not normal, that gives you something important to shoot for.
We've also interviewed some incredible journalists over the years. One of them was the dean of the Washington Political Press Corps and one of my mentors. When he was ready to talk about his conversion to Catholicism, I was honored that the so-called Prince of Darkness reached out to me. Here's Robert Novak.
In Syracuse University, I was giving a speech there, and the sponsoring group, the college Republicans, as they do before a lecture, they have the committee has a little dinner for you before, and there were all men and one young woman, and I noticed that she wore around her neck a crucifix, and I said, "Are you a Catholic?" And I don't know why I asked her that. It's, you know, I usually don't ask things like that, and I thought she said yes. As it turns out, I've later found she said no. She was Greek Orthodox, and. But I thought she said yes, and then she said, "Are you a Catholic?" I said, "No." I said that my wife and I have been going to Mass for many years. And she said, "Are you going to convert?" I said, "No, we have no such plans." And she said, "Mr. Novak, life is short, but eternity is forever." And I got a chill up my back. I got a chill right now when I said it. I always get a chill when I think of that, and it was like the Holy Spirit was there. I could hardly sleep that night. And I came back to Washington the next morning, and I told Geraldine, I think I'm ready to be a Catholic. And I think she was ready, had been ready for a long time.